Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you guys are at. I hope you have a fantastic day. It's Soul Saint here, and we have some of the most recently added aggressors into the game. That's right, we have a new Alien X Predator collaborations going on as a part of the whole Badlands series. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but regardless of that, we actually have a new update today that got dropped that has to do with newest champions that got dropped. We have Predator, as you guys can see on the screen here. I'm actually going to disappear so you guys can see it, but Predator has entered into the game as a lizard man, no less. Very thematic, I think, actually. Very, very dope to see him in our experience today, along with one other champion. Believe it or not, in the Dark Elves tribe, we also have our newest addition as well, Xenomorph. Oh my god, they made him look so good. The shiny little forward head, the long head, dude. Oh my lord, dude, this is so cool. I don't know if you guys are a fellow, movie enthusiast or a franchise connoisseur, but these guys have been around for a very, very long time. As a part of Alien Earth, as you guys see down here, trademarked with 2025 FX, and then of course on the Predator side, we also have that based off of the Predator Badlands, as I told you guys before. I'm gonna break down their kit. We're gonna talk about the whole thing that's gonna be happening and how you can get these champions basically and the summer words, and we're gonna just basically see how well they are. With that being said, I heard some news about it, and I'm kind of interested, particularly in the Predator side. So I don't know. You guys tell me in the comments if you guys were on Team Alien or Team Predator. I would say that, like, based off of all the movies and stuff that I watched, I was more fascinated with the whole Predator side. You know, I don't know why. It tickled my fancy. Them being super stealthy, super capable, and seeing how they're going to translate that into the game is going to be very interesting. So let's break it down. Let's get into it. So Predator is going to be a Force Affinity HP based nuker, is the way I'm understanding it. Wrist Blades level 1 is going to be attacking one enemy heals this champion by 30% of the damage dealt. That's not bad. Really crazy scaling that if he has good multipliers. Whenever this champion successfully evades an enemy skill and all of its accompanying effects, counterattacks with this skill. So he also has an evade mechanic, is what that sounds like, right? Now, here's the next part. Smart Disc attacks all enemies 2 times. After hitting the initial selected enemy, so where you target is actually going to be important, all other enemies will be hit in a random order. For the first hit, the damage received by the initial selected enemy will be increased by 75%. So the very next hit is going to be... the very first hit, the damage received is going to be increased by 75. Each subsequent hit is going to increase 15%, is going to decrease 15% bonus damage, reduced to 15% bonus damage overall, right? Also destroys max HP by 30% of the damage dealt, stacking up to a total of 50%. So if you're doing enough damage over time, maybe a battle of attrition's in play here, you can destroy up to 50% of a target's overall HP, which is crazy. For the second hit, though, the damage received by the initial selected enemy will be increased by 15%. Each subsequent hit following the initial hit will receive 15% more bonus damage. There's the part where the damage scaling goes up, stacking up to a total of 75% bonus damage. Now, here's the cool thing. If he's under Veil, or Perfect Veil, his attack is also going to ignore 15% of the target's defense. So you have a little bit of ignore defense in there, along with the fact that it does destroy max HP. This is a lot of output that you're getting from a single ability. It also hits a set like 2 times in a row. So like you're going to hit the first one, doing subsequent less damage overall, and then of course the next one will also do the same thing in terms of like the second hit, and each subsequent hit will stack up more and more damage. So depending on how things go, you can end up like the very final target, he's cooked if you're getting that much damage off in one go. Now, with that being said, we also have Combo Stick Throw, I think is how you say it. Attacks one enemy before attacking, places a Hunter's Gaze. Now, this debuff is only available right now, or only was available prior to this champion via Chimera, and it wasn't something that you could use. It was something that you would inherit from the Lion form. So now that they're putting this on a champion, making this champion the very first of its kind, it's very unique. Now, this debuff cannot be resisted if the champion is under Veil or Perfect Veil. If this attack kills an enemy, it places a block revive debuff on the target and a Hunter's Gaze debuff on a random alive enemy for 1 turn. The Hunter's Gaze debuff cannot be resisted if this champion is under Veil or Perfect Veil. If this attack does not kill an enemy, places a Perfect Veil buff on this champion for 2 turns and fills their turn meter by 50%. So basically, if you're not killing somebody with this A3, you're automatically going to get half of your turn meter back, or 50% of your turn meter back. And then it gives you Perfect Veil on top of that. So you may have to cycle back into this ability again. It's on a 3-turn cooldown, but you may have to cycle back into this ability to use it again to maybe go for a block revive. Or you may have to find some kind of perfect veil outlet from some other source in order to allow him to go straight into getting more block revives or Hunter Gales without having to scale into accuracy of some form. Let's see what his passive does right now. I'm probably going to butcher this, but it's Yautja Cloak? Yautja? Y'all tell me if I said that right or wrong. At the start of each round, places a perfect Veil and buff on this champion for 1 turn. Never mind, that solves our problem, right? He's going to start off with it. Before this champion takes a turn, also has a initial 50% chance to evade an enemy skill and all of its accompanying effects. This initial chance reduces to 0% after this champion's first turn in a round. Whenever this champion kills an enemy, grants this champion a 20% chance to evade enemy skills and accompanying effects, stacking up to 60%. So there is a stacking effect of evasion that he will acquire as he kills enemies, which makes him harder to target, which makes things a lot less likely to happen, and it can be very annoying. I want you to think of like Loki, I think was like the first evasion champion we had. We also have Mikey, who has the chance to evade, and I think also Shredder, if memory serves me correctly, is some of the options that do have evade. And yeah, not too bad at all. Not too bad at all. Perfect Veil. He also has an arena HP aura by 35%. And if you haven't been paying attention, every little bit of his ability is going to be based off of damage-wise, scaling on HP. So very, very cool. Very, very interesting dynamic of this champion. Now, in application, being a force HP-based nuker is good for a lot of reasons. So a lot of the nukers that are have been popularized over time until recently were all mostly blue. So they were mostly magic based. Force being a direct counter from an affinity standpoint puts him at a much better standing compared to someone who is like obviously Spirit, for example, right? But over time, we've had a lot more prominent figures join the fray with like Ashnar, Gallius, getting their recent buffs, making them very prominent in today's meta. And then of course, on top of that, people who have also since their release have been very prominent, like Galathir, for example, who is a great champion. Him being a neutral affinity to those makes him a great matchup into that, so there's no drawback to using him, right? Obviously, the only difference would be if he was like Spirit, he'd be even more potent, right? In terms of like viability of this entire like situation of his kit, I would say that this champion having block revive makes him a very strong staple. Him being an HP-based nuker also makes him a lot more tankier, so he would intrinsically be tanky because one of the stats that he scales on, or the only stat that he scales on, is going to be one that's about tankiness. You know, tankiness is scaling off of like HP and defense and passives on top of that that makes him harder to lock down, right? So in this regard, him being an HP-based nuker is already one checklist. By pushing for damage, you're automatically going to you're going to increase your tankiness into it. So that's great. Also, with the evasion on top of that too, it makes him a very hard, difficult target to lock down. This is a great option. His scaling is going to be the thing that I find intriguing in terms of like his multipliers. If their multipliers are anywhere near decent, he's going to be a solid option to grab as a HP-based nuker if you don't have one for Force Affinity. Now, with that being said, block revive I think is also a lot more prominent in today's meta, considering that we have a lot more interaction with champions that have come into the meta, like Theodosa, for example, or Galathir, like I mentioned before, or even Mariska, who's still around. They have a lot of bounce back, a lot of revive mechanics, so preventing them from being able to come back with block revive is very strong. You know, once they're down, that's it. Now, here's the thing, though. It's not guaranteed that he's able to do that, so I think that's going to be kind of important to note that unless you kill them with this ability, it's a block revive. So the other two abilities are not necessarily going to be the end-all, be-all in that regard, right? I want to scroll down here to the Cat's, not the Cat's Gaze, but the Hunter's Gaze debuff, so you guys can read it a little bit along with me so we can refamiliarize ourselves with it. Hunter's Gaze, damage dealt to a champion under Hunter's Gaze debuff cannot be decreased, blocked, redirected, or transferred. This applies only to damage dealt directly by skills, not from debuffs, passes, masteries, or blessings. So, for example, Soul Reap would apply to a blessing side of things. Masteries could be like War Master procs or things around those lines. Or Lightning's Cage, you know, the passive that comes from LC can do a little bit of extra damage onto a target. Those cannot be mitigated in a sense, or decreased, blocked, or redirected in any capacity by Hunter's Gaze. Whereas on hit damage, the actual hitting of somebody and applying a damage effect on them is not under the lines of it not applying to it. So Hunter's Gaze will technically, in essence, if you're doing direct damage to someone, mitigated in terms of like blocked or decrease, for example, things like I would say strengthen or something around those lines that would do damage mitigation, so to speak, will actually not stop Hunter's Gaze from allowing you to do like excessive amount of damage. So that's actually a really good counter buff measure in a sense that makes it very strong. So I'm actually really excited to see a Hunter's Gaze in application for PvP. Now, I'm not gonna lie, there's not really much else I would argue that this champion does, unless his multipliers are bonkers. I could see a bit of an issue with finding him in viable alternative areas, but I will give a nod that being able to do enemy max HP destroy is actually a nice little coinky dink that I would argue has its value. And I'm going to throw a nod to those of you guys that may or may not be progressing depending on where you're at in the game with something like Scarab King. He has one way to approach this boss is with like destroy HP effects, which will allow you to get rid of his purple bar, which is, in the lack of better words, his own form of stone skin, meaning that on hit damage that you do would be a lot more potent or mitigated if you had it, right? So being able to slowly chip away at that as an option is something that makes the Predator very valuable. So very cool nod to some areas where I see like application of this champion, you know? Pretty cool. I don't know if he goes above and beyond the order of things, but having a block revive makes him valuable, and also having the ability to be possibly capable of being able to address that revive mechanic makes him a very strong choice. Now, with that being said, I want to go to Xenomorph and take a look at this guy. This one, he looks really creepy. I think they did a great job. They have even the saliva, which he's really known for when he starts getting that zoom in effect on people. You know, I like the way that looks, you know. So, with that being said, let's take a look at him. Tail Stab. Attacks one enemy, places a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns, places 3 poison debuffs if this attack is critical. Then he also places a perfect veil buff on this champion for 2 turns. So, holy poisons. 3 if he is critting. And to be honest with you, it's very easy, I would say, in terms of the methodology to prioritize building a crit build on this champion. So, being able to guarantee those 3 poisons minus the fact that he is magic affinity and he's also attack based. So, I want you guys to keep that in mind. Attack one enemy on his infestation. Before attacking, places a stun debuff and an infest debuff on the target for 2 turns. These debuffs cannot be resisted if this champion's under perfect veil. Places a true fear debuff on all the other enemies for 1 turn. This debuff cannot be resisted if this champion is under perfect veil. So, fear me, fear me. And it's not resistible if he is under perfect veil. So veil is very important for both of these champions. Now, passive effect. Revives this champion with 50% HP and 50% turn meter whenever an enemy under infest debuff dies. It's like a debuff that's converted into a revive on death for you, but it's a debuff on the enemy, meaning that like if they try to buff strip you, which is becoming a lot more popular today with stone skin everywhere, by putting the debuff on the enemy, it's like you still have that placer of like, all right, you kill me, and then I'm back with revive on death through via infest. That's crazy. That's a crazy mechanic, and it's new. He's the first one of our experience to expect him, right? So, with that being said, Rip and Claw A3 attacks one enemy 2 times, deals 15% more damage for each poison debuff on the target. Also places a perfect veil buff on this champion for 2 turns. So, you got your veils via the A1 and the A3, and then you can really capitalize off of it in terms of being able to achieve debuffs via Perfect Veil and Irresistible with Perfect Veil, getting True Fears out on everybody and Infest on 1 target, and a stun on top of that, no less. These debuffs cannot be resisted, so even the stun is irresistible, which is actually huge. Making an opponent lose their entire turn is ridiculous, you know, and then on top of that, you're able to punish them if you're able to achieve a kill, and this guy so happens to not make it. Now, Infest on this is really cool with the aspect that you can understand the dynamic of the game. So attack type champions are normally like glass cannons. They're able to do a lot of damage. But then at the same note too, they're also very squishy, very easy to overcome in terms of like being able to pack a punch, which is why like defensive and HP nukers have been kind of very prominent. Not only are you able to deal decent damage, but you're able to survive a punch if you take one, right? So him being a glass cannon is very ironic in that aspect that, you know, you can't you can't really guarantee his survivability from a raw stat standpoint. I mean, obviously, he only has like 1K at 60 and 17K HP, you know, subsequently for HP and defense. You know, it's very, you know, it's normal to say that they're kind of on the lower side, right? With that being said, though, Perfect Veil does give a little bit of damage mitigation, and on top of that, too, Infest being able to bring them back without directly using a revive could actually be very prominent. You know, sometimes people in picks and bans with Live Arena would use a champion or two in their slots that are DPS based, and you end up with like 2 DPS, 2 utility or support champions, and then, you know, you go in battle, right? In this case, you know, he could be one of those options, and even if he does crap out, if Infest got out there, then, you know, you can use your Predator, for example, to kill that target, and next thing you know, Xenomorph is back in play with 50% HP and 50% turn meter, which means he's on his way back to his turn immediately after coming back alive. Not bad. Not bad. Now, being Magic Affinity also brings the problem that we've had before, which is that Force Affinity champions have become a lot more prominent. So he will have some matchup issues depending on who you're going against, right? And depending on the champion pool. Will he be on the top of the meta? I think that depends on multipliers. I think his kit is very cool in essence. My experience has been like True Fear has been more detrimental to me than to my opponents a lot of times. So that kind of feels a little weird. But, you know, hey, maybe you're one of those people who are a lot more luckier than I am, you know, and you can have that actually on your side as a benefit. Now, with that being said, though, how can you get these champions? These champions are acquiesceable via the following ways. Number one, I believe the referral program, which we, or daily login, the champion chase program that they're going to have, is going to allow all of us to get Xenomorph for free. That's right, you heard it, for free. All you have to do is log in 7 days in a row to get the champion. Now, with that being said, it starts today on the 24th. I don't believe... I believe this whole program, this whole Alien collab and Predator collab that they got going on is going to be lasting for a good bit. But in support of those two programs, they are releasing this out, and for the next 14 days that you log in, you'll be able to acquire not only the champion, but at least the 2-star blessing. And if you keep going further beyond, you will start seeing in phase 2, as time goes by, that as you do daily events and daily activities, you'll be able to acquire subsequently the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th blessing for Xenomorph. So very huge, really good assets to acquire, and a quick jump to getting a nuker for your account up and running. So I think, honestly, this is a great blessing. You know, thank you, Plarium. You know, we take those. Now, as for the Predator side of things, I believe the information that we've been required is that the champion will be available to acquire only during the event activation. Once acquired, the champion stays in the game permanently, and that's going to be via, let me see if I have it here. I'm trying to find it. I believe it was a pass. There it is, Champion Pass. And unfortunately, this one is a little bit more free to play, a little bit more pay to win. In order to acquire the champion, you have to have the Elite Pass, and in order to acquire the Elite Pass, you have to spend at least $39.99 for USD and the associated equivalency in your own currency, depending on where you're at in the world, to start accumulating the ability to get the bottom row things as you complete challenges daily. Now, normally with like champion passes, they are pretty easy to do in terms of like, it's as simple as, hey, go use a little bit of energy, log into the game and spend some silver. Sometimes it's something as simple as that. And I think that's pretty much the norm throughout the next couple of days. Is basically the cost, or the hard part about it is the cost in a sense. So if you are one that wants to get the champion, it costs you about $40 in USD. And then of course, if you want to just completely skip all the endeavors and you know you're not going to be logging in for a certain amount of time, but you want the champion, you can spend the big old 60 buckaroos to get all these extra amenities afforded to you, which will be everything you see down here. It comes with an instinct set along with some glyphs and some extra brews, and basically stuff to kind of get the champion online pretty quickly and pretty rapidly. I would be of the proponent that, considering how easy it is to get the challenges done, if you are interested in this champion, I'd probably go with just the regular Elite Pass and not spend the extra, you know, buckaroos to get the extra levels. I think grinding this out is probably gonna be super easy, and it's gonna be like you're not even gonna think about it, and you're gonna get it done. So I think, you know, you just work towards that gradually if you are gonna get the champion. Now, should you go for him? I mean, honestly, it's entirely up to you. If you're a fan of either of these franchises or these characters inside these franchises, I think, yeah, for sure, support the franchise that you care about, obviously. And if you enjoy the game, obviously enjoy the game too, and support it the way you see fit. I think that the champions, more particularly the Predator, has a lot more of a interesting PvP viability from being able to do destroy HP effects as well as, you know, block revive, and then, you know, he's an HP based nuker that's force affinity. It's really good, right? That's not to say that Xenomorph isn't valuable either, though. I mean, that Infest, which is the first of its kind, is very interesting, and that makes me wonder if we're going to see Infest as a debuff more more over time via PvE content that may be coming out, or through other champions that can capitalize off of Infest. Maybe getting more damage amplification, or maybe to like some kind of effect that allows you to transfer to other people, or to more effects on top of that. So like that's going to be an interesting dynamic to explore, and maybe having Xenomorph right now could be of value to you. With that being said, if you guys tell me what you guys liked for between the two franchises, which one was your more favorite, and if you're going to go for any of these champions, let me know. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. It sounds like we're all going to get Xenomorph, so it's really more of a question of, are you going to be a Predator? Hold that thought. With that being said, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and as always, always remember, stay ascended.
Got the